New polling data is showing a significant shift in the 2024 presidential race, with Donald Trump now leading in nearly all of the key swing states. This trend points to a potential electoral blowout for Trump over Kamala Harris, who is running in place of Joe Biden. If the numbers we're seeing today continue on this trajectory, we could be heading toward a landslide victory for Trump that may rival the political dominance of the 1980s. So let's dig into the latest polls, break down how the swing states are shaping up, and analyze the most likely scenarios for election night next month. Our journey starts by taking a deep dive into the swing states that will define the outcome of this election. The electoral map is critical to understanding how this race could unfold. As each state's polls close, we will see a clearer picture emerge of who is pulling ahead. We'll track the closing time state by state, moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, just as results will be coming in on election night. As we go through each of these key battleground states, I'll highlight where Trump has a lead, where Harris is holding on, and what the overall picture looks like based on the latest data. The action kicks off at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Polls close in 6 states, which together account for 60 electoral votes. Among these early states, Georgia is by far the most crucial. Georgia shocked the country back in 2020 when it flipped blue for Joe Biden, marking the first time a Democrat won the state since Bill Clinton's narrow victory in 1992. However, this year, it seems Georgia's political winds have shifted back in favor of the Republican. According to the latest polling from Quinnipiac, which generally tends to favor Democrats, Trump is leading Harris by a striking 5 points. Even other polls that are more favorable to Democrats show Trump ahead with an average lead of about 1.5. This consistent edge for Trump suggests that Georgia could revert to its traditionally red status after its blue detour in 2020. The fact that Trump has maintained a lead in Georgia for several months gives his campaign a lot of confidence in flipping this state back to the GO. It's safe to say that Georgia is now leaning Republican, and Harris will face an uphill battle to recapture the state's 16 electoral votes. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. Next, we shift our attention to Virginia, another state with a lot at stake for both parties. In 2020, Virginia wasn't much of a contest. Joe Biden easily won by 10 percentage points, but the 2024 race is shaping up quite differently. Harris's support has proven to be much weaker than Biden's, according to a Rasmussen Reports poll, one of the more reliable sources when it comes to gauging voter sentiment. Harris only has a slim 3-point lead. This is a far cry from Biden's comfortable double-digit win 4 years ago. Harris's narrow lead indicates some serious vulnerabilities, and if things don't improve for her, Virginia could be in play for Trump. However, for now, we'll cautiously mark Virginia as leaning blue, though the state is nowhere near the safe Democratic territory it was in 2020. In contrast, a handful of states with Saturday 0 p.m. poll closings will offer no surprises. Indiana, Kentucky, and South Carolina are solidly Republican and will undoubtedly go to Trump. Meanwhile, Vermont is a safe blue state that will easily go to Harris. These early states will give Trump an initial boost as he racks up electoral votes from deep red territories. After the first round of polls close, Trump is expected to lead with 44 electoral votes, while Harris will have 16 at 7:30 p.m. The electoral map becomes even more interesting. 3 more states, Ohio, North Carolina, and West Virginia, closed their polls with a combined 38 electoral votes up for grabs. The most critical of these is North Carolina, which has been a key swing state in the last 2 elections. Trump narrowly won North Carolina in both 2016 and 2020, and the polls suggest he's on track to repeat that performance in 2024. According to the latest Emerson College poll, Trump holds a narrow 1-point lead over Harris. A 1-point lead might not seem like much, but the consistency of Trump's edge here tells a deeper story. Out of the last 14 polls, Harris has led in only 2, which is a much worse position than where Biden was at this point in 2020. Based on this, we can mark North Carolina as tilting red, though it remains competitive. Ohio is another state where Trump has a solid advantage. Polls show him leading by 6 points, and if history is any guide, Trump could exceed expectations in Ohio on Election Day. In both 2016 and 2020, Trump won Ohio by a much larger margin than polls had predicted. Ohio has been trending Republican for several cycles now, and it looks like 2024 will follow this pattern. While the race here is not as tight as in North Carolina, Ohio is still a bellwether state, and a strong Trump performance could indicate broader Republican success across the Midwest. We'll mark Ohio as leaning Republican. West Virginia, meanwhile, is one of the most reliably conservative states in the country, and Trump will win it without breaking a sweat. This state has consistently supported Republican candidates, and 2024 will be no exception. Things really heat up at 8:00 p.m. When polls close in 16 states plus the District of Columbia, together these states represent a whopping 171 electoral votes, and this is where we'll start to see some of the major battlegrounds declared. Some of these states will be easy to call. Trump will sweep through Oklahoma, Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama, while Harris will easily carry Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, and D.C. A few other states like Illinois, New Jersey, and Delaware are expected to go blue as well, though the margins may be narrower than what we saw in 2020. However, one of the most important states closing at 0 p.m. is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has become one of the most hotly contested battlegrounds in recent elections. In 2024, the latest polling is showing a dead heat between Trump and Harris. Emerson College has them tied, while Trafalgar Group, a pollster with a strong track record, gives Trump a 3-point lead. In 2016, Trafalgar was one of the few pollsters to correctly predict Trump's upset victory in Pennsylvania, so their numbers carry significant weight. Harris's failure to break away in Pennsylvania is a major red flag for the Democrats. Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes are absolutely critical, and if Trump can flip this state, it will be a game changer for his path to victory. For now, we'll mark Pennsylvania as leaning Republican. Another notable state in this group is New Hampshire, though it's a much smaller battleground. Harris leads by 7 points in the latest polls, but New Hampshire polling has historically overestimated Democratic support. While Harris is likely to win New Hampshire, we'll keep an eye on this state, especially if her margins shrink as we get closer to Election Day. For now, we'll mark it as leaning blue. Maine presents a more complex picture. Harris is leading by 9 statewide, but Trump is winning in the more conservative 2nd congressional district. Maine splits its electoral votes by district. So while Harris will likely take the state as a whole, Trump is expected to capture one of Maine's 4 electoral votes. We'll mark Maine as leaning blue overall, but with that 1 electoral vote going to Trump. Florida, long the epicenter of presidential elections, is looking increasingly out of reach for Harris. Polls show Trump leading by 5 points, and given Florida's history of underestimating Republican support, Trump could win by an even wider margin. In 2020, Trump overperformed the polls in Florida, and now that the AGP has solidified its hold on the state, it's possible Trump could win by as much as 10 points. Florida, once considered a toss-up, is now leaning red and looks unlikely to swing back to the Democrats this cycle. By 8:30 p.m., Arkansas will close its polls, and Trump will easily secure this solid red state. The focus will then shift to the next big batch of states closing at 9:00 p.m., when 15 states representing 163 electoral votes come into play. Trump is expected to win Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, and most of Nebraska, except for its 2nd congressional district, where Harris could pick up a single electoral vote. Kansas and Louisiana will also go to Trump without much competition. One of the biggest battlegrounds in this group is Arizona, where Trump is leading by narrow margins in the latest polls. Arizona flipped blue in 2020, but this year it looks like Trump could take it back. Polls show Trump ahead by 1 to 3, depending on the source, and he's been consistently leading in most polls conducted in the state. We'll mark Arizona as leaning red, with Trump in a strong position to flip it back to the Gulpy. Colorado and New Mexico, both of which went blue in 2020, are also trending toward Harris, though with narrower margins than Biden had. Harris leads by 11 points in Colorado and 6 points in New Mexico, but these leads aren't as secure as they were for Biden. Still, for now, we'll mark both states as leaning blue. Finally, Texas, one of the biggest prizes of the night, looks like it will stay solidly Republican. Trump is leading by 5 points in the latest polls, but he has a history of overperforming in Texas, which has been trending Republican for years. Yeah, the polls are accurate. Trump could win Texas by an even larger margin than expected. We'll mark Texas as leaning red, with Trump in a strong position to keep the state. As the night progresses, Trump's lead in the electoral vote count is likely to grow, with him holding solid advantages in most of the battleground states. Harris will need a significant shift in the polls or an unprecedented voter turnout surge to have a chance at closing the gap. But based on the data, it looks like Trump is poised for a commanding victory. We'll continue to watch how these swing states evolve in the final weeks before Election Day. But as of now, the momentum is clearly on Trump's side.